This is 1020s, a podcast from 1020 Marketing. 10 episodes, 20 minutes each. Because meaningful marketing gets to the point.
Hey, Bev.
Hi, Mark.
How you doing?
I am doing well. Thanks. Hi, everyone who is listening/watching.
Yes, this is another episode of 1020s. And this week, I just want to say we're chatting about the role of learning programs in marketing. And I have another really special guest. You know, Bev, you've been doing the heavy lifting on finding the first two guests. Today, I've done a little bit of the heavy lifting to find my friend and collaborator, Roxanne Desforges. Roxanne is a founding partner of a small agency here called Pure and Applied. They do research, strategy, and learning design. Actually, Roxanne and I have, became fast friends, I would say, after meeting at a cinq-à-sept in probably 2019-ish, I want to say. And then we eventually got to collaborate on a project for a shared client that I worked with. Roxanne and her partner, Nikki, executed the most organized, professionally run, intelligent marketing project I've ever worked on. Really, she was one of the most impressive suppliers and partners that I've ever brought in on a job.
Yeah, I'm really excited to meet her.
Yeah, okay.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
What's a cinq-à-sept?
Oh, it's a happy hour. French for a happy hour.
Oh,
5 to
because you're
7.
French. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm just in
Quebec.
Toronto,
That's
so I don't know what that
Yeah.
means.
So it's a happy hour. So what I'm really hoping for is to get a great understanding from Roxanne about, the learning programs and how they relate to marketing.
Okay. Sounds good.
So let's bring Roxanne in.
Let's bring her in. Hi.
Hey.
Hello there.
One of my favorite people. How are you?
Good. How are you?
We're good. We usually start off, Roxanne, just by having our guests introduce themselves, give a little context, but maybe just if you can tell us about what you do and, set up the conversation about learning programs and how they relate to marketing. That would be great.
Sure. So I'm a founding partner at Pure and Applied. We're a learning research and development firm. And we help organizations create e-learning courseware, build out their operations, grow their teams, all to deliver effective and engaging educational programs. Ultimately, we work together to help empower people, no matter what their area of expertise or content is.
What industries do you work with usually?
Well, e-learning can transcend industry because, as you know, we need to learn in every part of life. But at Pure and Applied, we do tend to focus on working with nonprofit organizations, associations, and companies that really have a purpose-driven mandate to create some kind of social impact.
When I met you, Roxanne, you had just done an e-learning program for a training program for sort of sensitivity about mental health issues in the workplace and how to deal with that. To me, it was about the process that you have built, which I believe can apply to any type of project. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you get to the nugget of what your client needs to put out there as part of their learning programs? And how does that, fit into the marketing mix generally for that client?
I remember kind of seeing the similarities between e-learning projects and marketing projects. And I think at the heart of both of these fields is a desire to deeply understand either the customer or the learner, depending on where you're coming from. And while we both strive to do that, we can think about it in slightly different ways. So where you would be engaging in, customer research and thinking about the voice of the customer and all of these things, we're doing a needs assessment, which is taking the time to really understand what are our learners' needs, who are they, how do they think, what are their fears and motivations. And what I'll say is at Pure and Applied, we take an intersectional approach to doing that, which means that we really factor our learning audience's full identity. So we're really thinking about their race, their ethnicity, their educational backgrounds, their socioeconomic status, their learning challenges and difficulties maybe in engaging with content, all aspects of who they are, especially if they lived through challenges in their lives, making sure that learning is equitable and that we're telling stories from the perspectives of our learners, because we believe that will be what engages them most. And I know that marketers think in similar ways, but maybe use slightly different language or slightly different methodologies or what have you to come to similar outcomes.
Well, right away, the thing that stuck out to me was it sounds so similar when we are looking at a brand and we are looking at who their audience is, and you try and get like the most precise segment possible. And when you speak about intersectionality and things like that, to make it as customized as possible to the person that you're talking to.
And, our language for being able to do that is thinking in sort of culturally relevant ways. We do create learner profiles, which is maybe similar to marketing personas. And we try to think about people as human beings more than just data. We do try to think about their lived experiences, what challenges might they be bringing. A lot of the reasons people may not have had success in learning or in education in their past often has a lot to do with to what extent that content was actually catering to them, right? Or was it really designed for someone else?
To me, we're talking completely the same language. Like, you're talking about content in terms of a video that teaches, XYZ subject, in XYZ amount of time. To me, when we're talking about content, we're talking about, could be anything that we would produce for a client, whether it's a social media post, whether it's an ad campaign, whether it's, some long form content, a blog post, a video just like you make. To me, it's all in the same ballpark. It all is connected.
Yeah, and there are a lot of similarities in terms of content, but I think that sometimes the goals of our content might be different.
Right.
So, where marketing content is trying to create conversions of different kinds, educational content is really trying to generate specific types of learning. So including knowledge development, skill development, like the ability to be able to actually do something that you couldn't do before because of this video. And I think oftentimes people think, well, information is learning, right? Any old video could be learning if you think about it.
Right.
And what we try to do as instructional designers is kind of teach people that information is not tantamount to instruction. It's actually the transformation of information into a learning experience, which means that we're applying like principles of learning science. We're applying what we know about how the brain works and how it can, assimilate information and bring it into your short-term and long-term memory so that, even weeks after you've seen or read something, you're still remembering it. You're still able to use that information and apply it. Whereas sometimes we read content online and I've forgotten the next day what it's about, so there are different principles at work sometimes, but a lot of the foundation is similar.
People learn so differently. And I think it's only like weirdly recently that people are talking about how differently people learn. And you can see it's getting implemented in schooling. It's so interesting how you mentioned you have the information, but it's how you package the information to make it accessible to that specific group of people that helps them be able to assimilate the information.
Yeah, so there's different points of view on this out there, but what I'll say is that there's a lot about us that is the same, right? Human beings, in terms of how we learn. And there are also some differences, which can be based on like our cognitive abilities or based on our prior knowledge, right? We're not all coming to the classroom with, the same life or the same experience or the same context. Some of us may have had breakfast and some of us may not have. That can also impact my ability to learn on any given day, right? So what instructional designers try to do is really factor that context and that baggage that different human beings might bring to a learning environment into the learning experience and really just try to optimize for it as much as possible.
I'm really fascinated in that psychological piece.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little bit more to that? Like what goes into what kind of research and data needs to be collected, what that process looks like when creating a program?
Sure. I mean, there's different types of information or areas of research that are coming into play at different stages of the e-learning development process. So the first step in the process is to conduct a needs assessment to really understand who our learners are, what is the objective of the learning that we're creating for our client. We created a course on mental health. And so what do people already know about mental health in the workplace, for example? Do they know quite a bit, or do they know very little? So all of these things can inform the starting point for our course and in helping the organization achieve its ultimate goals, which is usually some kind of behavioral outcome. You want to shift how people think and how people behave at work. In our case, we were trying to reduce the stigma around having a mental illness at work, right? How can we change hearts and minds through a learning experience that can sort of get people thinking differently? So we understand the audience, we understand the goals, and then with that information, we can inform how we develop a curriculum. So what will we teach them, and what will the scope of that learning be? What will the sequence of the information look like? How will we assess for learning? How will we know if they have actually achieved the goal or not? We use assessments. So like something like a quiz would be an assessment that would allow us to know whether or not someone has actually achieved the goal of learning. And so, yeah, there are many different approaches to integrating the science of learning at different stages in the process. And in the curriculum, we're really thinking a lot about active learning.
You're talking a lot about marketing, and we're relating it to marketing, but I want to hone in a little bit more of the closer relationship between the two. You know, when we talk about storytelling, you know, marketers talk about storytelling all the time, that, you know, brands need to craft a story and people need to feel your story. And we talked about it in our first episode, Bev and I, in terms of brand personality and connecting with people. So I'm curious about that storytelling journey and how you handle that in an e-learning environment.
So when it comes to storytelling, I'm sure we use similar strategies, but ultimately we want to create an arc that, you know, allows the learner to slowly but surely enter into a narrative and, you know, achieve a peak of maybe a challenge or an opportunity, and ultimately feel like they can resolve it at the end and feel like they've grown as a result. So, you know, a lot of common models are like the hero's journey, for example, but there are also some other what we call kind of trauma-informed models that factor, you know, especially if the content is heavy. Sometimes what we're marketing about is equity and empowerment and topics that are, if you're an immigrant trying to find employment in Canada, these can be some of the different topics that we've worked on. If you're really trying to change how someone thinks about something, for example, you know, we created a program on called Diversify STEM, which is for engineers to understand the role that women play in engineering and how valuable and how much of an asset they add, and how we deserve, you know, equity in engineering. How can we shift the way people are thinking to be more open and inclusive? Well, you don't want to sort of hit people over the head with your message, right? You want to bring them in slowly, share stories, invite them to empathize with a character who they can relate to, that maybe shares some of the same lived experiences as them. And slowly but surely, you're kind of bringing them on this journey that is really more of that soft approach to changing a mind.
I was going to say, with trauma specifically, that makes so much sense to me, that you would see yourself in the story, because then you're removed a layer from it. So it's less like you're re-experiencing it, but you're seeing somebody else experience it. Not this abstract story about something, it's about them.
Absolutely. In some cases, we use scenarios to test learning. So if, we've provided you with a lot of information about equity in the workplace and say, this is what inclusive behavior looks like, and you've learned it, then we can present you with a scenario, like a real life situation that you might be facing in the workplace, and ask you how you might react or how you might behave. And all of these, the imagination that's required to think about what your answer would be is lending itself to transforming how you think.
Yeah.
And the more you give people the opportunity to practice that, the more likely they are to transfer the learning that's taking place in the classroom to the real world. That is something that requires a lot of intention.
Roxanne, I'm shaking my head, not because I don't agree with you, but because every time we talk, you make so much sense. Like, you're one of the most intelligent people I have interactions with.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. I find that when you do talk about e-learning in the context of marketing, you do this thing where you're trying to separate the two. And what I would say is that incorporating more e-learning strategies into our marketing planning and execution would be a wonderful thing for, the right clients, let's call it. The potential for stickiness with your audience is so much more available from a marketing standpoint to the organization that's putting out that e-learning program. And I think it's an underutilized tactic or strategy or program in the overall marketing mix. And I think it's part of it. It should be part of it more. I would agree with you. Yeah.
Once someone has genuinely learned something from you and they feel like they have grown as a human being because of your content, the learning experience that you've created, it's undeniable that you've created a relationship, right, with that person.
We talk about that all the time. That's when there's a real connection and you feel it.
It's a basic human value, right? Like the people that you learn from, and we talk about a brand as a person often in marketing, but the people that you learn from are the people that you're going to want to be around more. But having relationships that is a two-way benefit of value, you're both getting value out of it. And that's what it is to me.
Absolutely. And I think that the organization is in turn learning from the customer base. So if you're using a learning management system to deliver your learning, you're collecting so much data about your learners.
Behaviors. Yeah.
And it can be one of the most sophisticated forms of customer research out there, because you're constantly delivering content and you're able to see where people are confused, what skills are they struggling to develop, and those gaps represent opportunities for new products, new services, new content. So organizations that do it well are thinking about how a learning management system, along with all the other analytics they're getting from let's say, the external world, right, and social and all of those places, and they're aggregating that data to think and put together a profile of their customers that is really holistic and really rich.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm gonna have to say thank you at this point. Roxanne, honestly, great conversation. I think you're gonna be a regular on this show. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time, Roxanne. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
All right. Take
care.
Bye. So that was super cool. Super cool. Like, she's one of my favorite people.
Just to look at marketing through an actual e-learning lens was not something that I had ever thought about before. And that's seems very valuable.
I think we got to say goodbye. So thanks again. And we will talk next week.
Yep.
On our next episode of 1020s. See ya.
Bye.